The Catholic case for Donald Trump. First, a little backdrop, my story from liberal to conservative. When I was in college, nearly all of my friends and professors were either liberals or leftists. While I came from a conservative family, I quickly absorbed the liberal ideology on campus. I believed in equality for all. I saw the world through the lens of the haves versus the have-nots. I wanted to be a champion of the little guy. I believed in clean air and clean water, and I thought conservatives only cared about profit rather than supporting the common good. So these were my values as a liberal Democrat: affirming the dignity of every human person, solidarity with the poor, discrimination is bad, protecting the environment, protecting our constitutional rights, policies based on facts and science, foreign policies based on defense and not intervention, promoting transparency and not corruption. I still have the same exact core values as a conservative Republican. Nothing has changed as far as my values. These are the life events and readings that have kind of caused me to change direction. I switched basically in my mid to late 30s. I switched from liberal Democrat to conservative Republican. So it was kind of a very long path, though it wasn't like an overnight thing. I started with getting a job, starting paying taxes. I got married, became a parent, met conservatives that I respected. I started reading Thomas Sowell. I read about 7 or 8 of his books, and I learned about the principles of subsidiarity and economic liberty. I started becoming attracted to thinkers like Milton Friedman, Ludwig von Mises, and William F. Buckley. Rather than seeing everything through the prism of the haves versus the have-nots, I started seeing the world through the prism of liberty and tyranny. I started a business, I hired employees, I started to research the Catholic faith. I was particularly attracted to the pro-life arguments, natural law arguments, and the teachings of Thomas Aquinas. I appreciated the depth and diversity you can find, both leftists, liberals, and conservatives in the Catholic Church, and I actually enjoy that. I think that's important, to be honest. I think conservatives and liberals need to talk to each other and hold each other accountable and reason things together. And that's actually one of the reasons why I love being a Catholic, is because we're basically 50-50. Um, hey, I wish we were all conservative Trumpies, but I do think it's important to have multiple viewpoints. I think that's a positive. Anyway, I became even more conservative after becoming a Catholic when I got engaged with thinkers like Dale Hudson, Helen Alvari, Mary Eberstadt, Father Robert Sirico of the Acton Institute, and Arthur Brooks. Um, when my wife got cancer, I became even more convinced of the folly of nationalized healthcare. If we had a Canadian British style single payer system, my wife would be dead because her first surgery was considered elective, and in Canada, elective surgeries is a 5-month wait, and for my wife, that would have been too late. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. This is probably one of the most powerful arguments from Thomas Sowell. Uh, you know, uh, all the power and money that goes to Washington directly feeds the K Street corruption. So follow the money trail, as they say. And as you give more money and influence and power into Washington, um, all the other stuff comes along with it, the bad stuff. Um, the state's power can be easily abused and potentially become more pernicious than private corporations or individuals, because the state's power is exercised at the end of a barrel. Poor people need good paying jobs. While we need reasonable taxes and regulations, we should acknowledge that excessive taxes and regulations almost always reduces wealth and job creation. An excessive regulatory regime almost always points to crony capitalism. Trump understands this, which is why he's big on deregulation. Jobs are created when people are allowed to take risks and are not hindered by mafia-type territorial protectionist regulations. Economic liberty is a better way to help the poor, not state-controlled redistribution schemes that steal from the rich. When we ignore the law of supply and demand, it is like ignoring the law of gravity. Negative consequences will follow. Raising the price of labor reduces the demand for it. When you raise the minimum wage above what a worker can produce, unemployment will necessarily increase. Spanish scholastics 200 years before Adam Smith, building on the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, documented the adverse consequences of government intervention in markets. The Spanish scholastics Juan de Lugo and Juan de Salas clearly understood that there was no way for the government to determine what a price of commodity should be, much less be able to justify price controls. In effect, they were saying that establishment of prices had to be left to the market. They were actually ahead of Adam Smith in that they also understood how to properly value labor. Market wages are fair wages. Smith labor valuation wasn't that developed. Macroeconomics is a science. Too many liberals ignore this fact, preferring to live in a fantasy land where there is such a thing as a free lunch. There is no free lunch. Christians have a moral obligation to help the poor. Unlike many libertarians, I believe the government does play a legitimate role in helping those in most need. Having said that, private charity is far more moral and just because it's voluntary redistribution. Also, the state doesn't care about your soul. However, the cure must never be worse than the disease. Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder talk about the unintended consequences of liberal policies quite often. The road to hell is paved with good intentions of liberals. For example, welfare programs destroyed the black family during LBJ's war on poverty. The destruction of the black family has now led to something very close to a permanent underclass. The irony is that the liberals today attribute this permanent underclass to structural racism rather than their own disastrous policies of the 1960s. For Catholics and Protestants, the family has always been the foundation of a thriving, successful society. Too many policies of the left end up dismantling the family and replacing the traditional view of society built on a successful family with the state now playing the role of raising our children. This is cultural Marxism at its worst. Environmental policies. One of the most hated Republicans of all time, right after Donald Trump, Richard Nixon, established the EPA. Clean air and clean water requires a lot of money. Capitalism is the only proven way to create wealth needed to pay for clean air and clean water. The left hates capitalism. The Democratic Party is tending to the left. I believe climate change is real. I believe human activity contributes to climate change and that there are negative consequences of climate change. However, the Paris Climate Accord has had zero effect on improving the negative consequences of climate change. I'm not going to get into the problems with the Paris Climate Accord, but a lot of it has to do with redistribution from the United States taking our money, basically. Every liberal environmental policy proposal to date has no proven outcome that would improve negative consequences of the change in any substantial way. And that's the biggest problem I have with liberals is that they have all these great ideas, the Green New Deal, but they never talk about the cost and they never talk about the end result benefit, and they never do an analysis between the cost and the benefit. Fracking and natural gas has enabled the U.S. to exceed the goals of the Paris Climate Accord. Fracking and natural gas has enabled the U.S. to be energy independent and create a huge number of jobs. Eliminating fossil fuels will increase the cost of fuel for all Americans, hurting the poor, especially the working poor, the most. Biden has promised to get rid of fracking and fossil fuels. And again, it's those costs, those hidden costs of all these great ideas. Foreign policy is always hard. There will always be bad actors and challenges how to deal with them properly. Obama and Bush pursued policies of nation building and intervention that either made very little difference or made things worse. Donald Trump has not pursued these failed policies. Obama's apology tour was idiotic. Obama's Arab Spring was a disaster. Obama's Iran deal was a joke. Obama's killer drones were against Catholic just war principles. Obama's hatred of the only democracy in the Middle East made me sick to my stomach. Donald Trump is the first president to recognize the reality in the ground in Israel when he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Donald Trump is the first president since Jimmy Carter to accomplish multiple peace deals between Arab countries and Israel. We've had 4 years of peace under Donald Trump. That's good enough for me. I didn't even mention his getting rid of ISIS, which is what Obama left us with. We are a nation of immigrants. Legal immigration is good. Illegal immigration is bad. 20 years ago, liberals and Democrats agreed that illegal immigration hurt those that came in legally. Unskilled, it was unfair, basically, to those that came in illegally. Let's put it that way. Unskilled immigrants hurt the working poor by importing cheap labor as competition. Biden has promised free, actually taxpayer-funded health care for illegals. A large number of Democrats want to defund ICE and open our borders. This is nuts. St. Thomas Aquinas said we should support our nation's sovereignty. He said that nationalistic patriotic pride is a moral good. Aquinas said that we should place a higher priority on our fellow countrymen over the interest of others. Aquinas said our home country should be understood as part of our extended family. Family comes first, then our extended family, and foreigners last. Loyalty to our home country is part of the fourth commandment to honor our mother and father. In general, I'm a huge believer in free trade. However, we need to hold, I missed the H there, our trade partners' feet to the fire. Trump understands that China is not a good international player or trade partner. They use slave labor. They don't have good environmental protections. They have a terrible track record of basic human rights. They've had American job-killing tariffs on our goods many years before Trump supposedly started this trade war. Trump is the first president in a long time who actually cares about the American workers. Biden has always been tight with China. His son has made millions off of Joe's relationship with the Communist Chinese Party. Biden's embedded corrupt government labor unions like SEIU that use monopoly status to take our taxpayer money to kick back to the Democrat Party. Science has proven that life begins at conception. From conception, we have distinct DNA from our parents. From conception, our human growth begins and continues nonstop until adulthood. From conception, we only need nutrition and a safe environment to grow and thrive. Scripture also affirms that God loves us even when we are in our mother's womb. From the beginning of Christianity, abortion has always been perceived as immoral and taking of innocent human life. Some critics complain that those who say abortion is immoral do not address situations like ectopic pregnancies or uterine cancer where the life of the mother may be at risk. This is a red herring because most pro-life Christians affirm that there may be circumstances where it is illicit to have a procedure done to save the life of mother that may result in the death of the unborn child. Abortion is the taking of innocent life. Read Patricia Sandoval's Transfigured or Unplanned by Abby Johnson. They were written by former Planned Parenthood workers who had radical conversions to the pro-life cause. To be honest, Transfigured is one of the best books I've ever read, period. If you're still pro-choice after reading this book, then I will give you credit for at least hearing the other side. Most pro-choice people never even attempt to understand the other side. Here is an excerpt from the Democratic platform. Democrats are committed to protecting and advancing reproductive health rights and justice. We believe unequivocally, like the majority of all Americans, everyone should be able to have access to health care services, including legal abortion. We will repeal the Title X domestic gag rule and restore federal funding for Planned Parenthood, which provides vital, preemptive, and reproductive health care for millions, especially low-income people and LGBTQ plus people. Okay. Democrats oppose and will fight to overturn federal and state laws that create barriers of reproductive health and rights. We will repeal the Hyde Amendment and protect and codify the right for reproductive freedom. We condemn acts of violence, yada, yada, yada. We will address the discrimination and barriers that for meaningful access to that, yada, yada, yada. It's all there, black and white. We know where the Democrats stand. Biden and Harris are tight with corrupt Planned Parenthood organization that use their near monopoly status to take our taxpayer money to kick back to liberal Democrats. California Attorney General Kamala Harris launched an investigation into David Daleiden for secretly filming Planned Parenthood officials as part of a hidden camera probe into fetal tissue trafficking. As Attorney General, she never investigated Planned Parenthood. Of course, they gave her lots of cash, as they do Biden. Republican conservatives want a colorblind society. Democrats promote reverse discrimination, which always results in discrimination against Asian Americans, at least at the college level. Um, reverse discrimination is still discrimination. White liberals are condescending towards blacks, always virtue signaling and telling them that they need their white liberals to save them. Conservatives want blacks to have the best education possible, including access to charter schools and private education using vouchers. Conservatives support school choice, not teachers' unions. Conservative Republicans hate racism and discrimination. Blacks and Hispanics had the fewest unemployment levels ever recorded under Trump before the pandemic. After the crisis is over, the numbers will return if Trump is reelected. Trump has a clue how jobs are created. Democrats have no clue. Trump created opportunity zones to promote African American entrepreneurship and businesses. Trump passed criminal justice reform to remedy Joe Biden's crime bill that devastated the black community. BLM is a Marxist anti-family organization that should not be supported. Black lives do matter. So do blue lives. All lives matter. How cops are being traded today makes me sick to my stomach. Liberals have set up impossible expectation the government can eliminate racism in the hearts of every individual. There will always be racists. There will always be bad cops. Hands up, don't shoot that started the BLM movement was based on a lie. If you're only going to read or watch one thing from my suggested YouTubes, it would be this conversation between Larry Elder and David Rubin 4 years ago called Conservatives, Black Lives Matter, Racism. It's an excellent summary of the conservative position on race. Another one I would encourage you to watch is Candace Owens' interview with Heather McDonald, and she talks about the statistics supporting how important blue lives are and how important we need the police for minorities to thrive. Democrats have been calling conservative racist without evidence for decades, and it really makes me mad. There's such a thing as the sin. Of course, there's a sin of bearing false witness, that's what they do. But there's even another sin that a lot of Catholic never Trumpers need to learn about and look it up. It's called the sin of detraction. But regardless, please watch Trump versus Biden, which candidate is racist. I think it's on YouTube as well. Kayvon, the comedian, goes into details about this question about who is more racist. And it turns out that Biden is far more racist than Trump. Transgender therapies have never been grounded in science. Only women can get pregnant, give birth, become mothers. Biological men should not be competing against women in sports. Biological men should not be in women's bathrooms. Too many liberals are all about affirming the subjective experience and denying any objective truth. They are quick to affirm what is broken, transgender dysphoria, to be whole. Please search The Terrible Fraud of Transgender Medicine by Dr. Quinn L. Van Meter in YouTube. He was an early advocate, therapist, and surgeon involved in transgender medicine. He said in long term, these therapies do not help the individuals. Please search Abigail Shrier on YouTube and listen to her interviews about her recent book. Obama forced schools to allow biological boys into girls' locker rooms. Biden was in favor of transgender therapies for those as young as 8 years old. The First Amendment is under attack. Free speech is dying. Religious freedom is under attack. People are getting fired for not buying into the latest diversity, inclusion, and equity projects on campus and corporations. Liberal fascism is out of control. Trump is one of the few politicians resisting the woke cancel culture. A good channel that covers this topic is Dave Rubin's Rubin Report. For your information, Dave is a married gay man that supports Trump. I also encourage you to watch a few of the walk away videos on YouTube. Many discuss the liberal leftist cancel culture that's gotten out of control. Criminals and other bad actors do not obey our gun laws. Only law-abiding citizens obey gun laws. You end up disarming the good guys. There are between 5 and 10 million AR-15 rifles in America today. Outlawing them will only create a black market for these and similar weapons. Studies are clear that gun restrictions almost always increase violent crimes. The Second Amendment was not created for hunters or self-protection. The Second Amendment was created to keep an armed citizenry in order to keep the government in check. So I wanted to put this on here, but I will say it is Trump says a lot of stupid things. There are a lot of stupid Trump supporters. Those two things are irrefutable, but there are even more stupid Biden supporters. So that's kind of a wash. So let's talk about character. There's no debate that Trump has had a very checkered past with women. At least he wasn't fooling around in the Oval Office with interns like Bill Clinton. What about Joe Biden? I believe Tara Reid. Please watch the 60 Minutes Australia video interview of Tara Reid. Yes, Trump has many flaws. In his darker moments, he's shown himself to be a jerk, a bully, egomaniac, narcissist, etc., etc. Yes, Trump has problems with telling the truth. He says a lot of stupid things. However, every other sentence that comes out of Biden's mouth today are also lies. Biden was caught lying the first time around back in the 1980s when he was running for president and had to step down in disgrace, and that dishonesty really has never left him. We also know that Bidens are dirty. His siblings and son got rich while he's vice president. Read the book Profiles in Corruption. Also listen to the interviews that just came out from his business partner, Tony Bobulinski. We also know that the Obama administration, remaining deep state officials, did what they did to candidate Trump with Carter Page and spying on his candidacy was far worse than anything Nixon did during Watergate. The truth is that all of us are broken. All of us have fallen short of the glory of God. I am voting for Trump because I love this country too much to allow the leftists to take it over. I'm a conservative who loves Dorothy Day. Conservatives are split, our Catholics are split on political issues. I have no problem with that. Pope Francis and I have different experiences and view the world very differently. However, we share the same Catholic principles of social justice and Catholic social teaching. These principles I still hold are universal, but how they get applied to specific policies is prudential. Satan wants Christians divided against each other. We need to learn how to agree to disagree, to stop attacking the character of others we disagree with, and we need to learn how to listen to each other. In the end, all political decisions are prudential. I could be wrong. I pray for humility. If I'm wrong, I pray that God will give me the grace to open my eyes to greater truth.